Thanks everyone for joining us today. We are doing another Facebook Live continuing on from last week. So today we're going to be talking about the 6 facts about telomeres and why they're super important for your health. So before we get started, I just want to introduce everyone on the webinar today. So we've got Dr. Kurt Bisnick joining us from Fargo, North Dakota. So Kurt's a doctor of chiropractic. He's been studying age reversal medicine for over 25 years. And he has his own, or he had his own practice, and he is also a wellness consultant. So welcome, Kurt.
Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. And we've got Trevor on the line as well. So Trev is really passionate about age reversal medicine and health, and very passionate about nutrition too. So welcome, Trev.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. This is an exciting day today. Once again, we're going to be sharing a bit more about, science about what's going on out there about age reversal. So yeah, telomeres is going to be a great subject.
Okay, great. So today we're talking about 6 facts about telomeres and why they're super important for your health. It's a really interesting subject. You might have heard of the word telomeres. Before we get started, I'm going to share a video and then we're going to have a chat about it. So let's share that video. Just bear with me. Thank you.
And now, eternal youth. Is it in a cage around the corner? News tonight of a breakthrough for some pioneering mice. But we always wonder, what does a fountain of youth for rodents reveal for humans? Here's Sharon Alfonsi reporting.
I feel tremendous!
In the movie Cocoon, it's a swimming pool that turns back the clock for a group of senior citizens. But now, researchers have found a way not just to stop, but reverse the aging process. The key is something called a telomere. We all have them. They're the tips or caps of your chromosomes, seen here in yellow. This is what it looks like in a young adult. But as you grow older, the telomeres become damaged and frayed, and as they stop working, we start aging, experiencing things like hearing and memory loss. Scientists took mice who were prematurely aged, added an enzyme, and essentially turned their telomeres back on. You can see it before the enzyme, after.
Their brain function improved, their fertility was restored. It was a remarkable reversal of the aging process.
Look at this picture. The mouse on the right has bad skin, gray hair, and is balding, but the one on the left had its telomeres flipped back on.
And you could see that essentially you now have a dark coat color, that the hair is restored, that the coat has a nice healthy sheen to it.
Even more dramatic, the change in brain size. This is before. The mice had 75% of a normal brain, like a patient with severe Alzheimer's. But after the telomeres were reactivated, the brain returns to normal size. As for humans, while it is just one factor, scientists now say by looking at our blood cells and measuring those telomeres, you can get a better idea of how well you'll age. The longer the telomere, the better the chances for a more graceful aging. But as for tinkering with them and turning back our aging process, researchers say we still have a long way to go. Sharon Alfonsi, ABC News.
So I've just paused the video. Can you guys see me?
Yeah, it's still stuck on the screen there, Katie. You haven't come up.
Isn't that exciting though? We find something like telomeres and it just changes the whole outlook of aging.
It's incredible, Kurt, because when I saw that video clip on the news, straight away I started thinking about my dad, because he passed from Alzheimer's, and when they mentioned that if you actually restore the telomeres, the brain size changed in the mouse from 75%, it reduces to 75%, and then they actually increase the brain size again when they actually did restoration of the telomeres.
Right. My head used to be the same size as yours, but what happened?
So Trev, do you want to kick off with some questions? Are we going to talk about it?
Yeah, what happened, Kurt?
I started taking products.
Hey, that's great, mate. Look, you know, these telomeres, I've just sort of been exposed to this science since I've been involved, you know, with you and learning a bit more from what you've been talking about. And yeah, can you tell us a bit more about them? I noticed in the actual video they showed two inverted U's and the ends of it, it looked like the ends of a shoelace. They use that as an analogy. So can you sort of explain a bit
Well,
more?
think of it, I like the shoelace analogy because people can see that every day, unless they have Velcro shoes, but every day they tie their shoes. And what happens is those little plastic ends on the shoelace, what they do is they protect the shoelace from unraveling. And really that's what a telomere does, is a telomere is the end of your DNA, the chromosome, and it kind of ties it together. And what happens is that every time a cell divides, it clips off a little bit of that end of that shoelace. Think of it like that. And it clips off a little bit, clips off a little bit, clips off a little bit. Pretty soon, if you cut away enough of your shoelace, guess what? You can't tie your shoes anymore, right? Well, at that point, we don't have enough telomere to protect our DNA any longer. Our chromosomes are exposed to the environment, and boom, that's when we get diseases, and chances are that's when we're going to die.
And so, Kurt, that brings us to the next, I guess, point. It says shorter telomeres equals shorter lifespan. I read that in some studies they'd shown that, you know, that there's a direct correlation between short telomeres and certain age-related diseases, even from, you know, as mentioned, Alzheimer's, but other things, including like even arthritis. If somebody's got really bad arthritis, they'll tend to have shorter telomeres. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
You bet. You know, so our DNA is programmed. We have certain things that we protect ourselves. Our insides protect us. And what happens is when those telomeres aren't long enough to provide that protection any longer, what happens is we start getting aging diseases, arthritis, Alzheimer's, cancer, memory loss, even appearance of aging, and all these different things that you just think of that older folks have problems with, right? And when you think of older people, you know, they normally, a lot of people pass away because of infections. And so if your telomeres are too short, even your immune system is affected. So every part of your body is really affected by it.
So I guess if people who are watching this, and including myself, people might think, oh, well, if it's so good and, you know, telomeres are the key, then how come, you know, we're all still aging and we've got these problems? But, you know, it really comes back to, I guess, when they discovered it and how it's being implemented. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, you know, and it all comes down to this is that, you know, and I've actually met a couple of the scientists that were working in the lab that got the Nobel Prize. So I've actually met those people. I've sat down with them. I've discussed this with them. And it's interesting, but the research, it was paid for so they could develop a drug. They're trying to come out with a drug that will slow the aging process down. And that's where they're going to make money. So we're not going to find out about nutritional supplements. We're not going to find out about a lot of this stuff because, I mean, if I just told you, if I said, hey, Katie, the most important thing that you can do for your telomeres is change your lifestyle. It's the most important thing that you can do. We can talk about all these supplements and things like that, but if you don't change your lifestyle, you're not gonna make that big a difference. What's interesting, and we were talking earlier, you know, like food, what kinds of things, and I know this is probably coming up, but if you don't mind, can I get into that right now?
Yeah, that was Trent's question. Yeah, sure.
I was just going to say though, before you get into that, Kurt, like, you know, you just said that, you know, a lot of this science is about to be developed by you know, pharmaceutical companies to create a drug, but obviously the science is actually coming from nature. So they're doing all this research, and I'm assuming that, you know, it's found out there in nature before they can make a synthetic drug. So that's correct, isn't it?
Yeah. So think of it kind of like this, okay? I mean, we talk about the shoelace analogy because people can think about that, they can see that. But really, it's kind of more like this. If I had a brick wall, and I took the brick wall, it wasn't cemented together, and I took the top row of bricks and I just slid it to the side, what's going to happen to the bricks on this end? As I'm pushing it this way, what's going to happen to the bricks on this end? They're going to fall off the edge of the wall, right? And so if I push it again, another brick falls off. If I push it again, another brick falls off. And then I go to the next row and I start pushing the row of bricks up. Well, that's kind of how it actually is occurring. So when we take and we talk about the whole theory of increasing our lifespan, increasing longevity, what we're really talking about is we're talking about, can we find a way to take those bricks and as they're falling, put them back on the wall, and put them back on the wall fast enough that the guy that's pushing them off can't keep up to the guy putting them back on.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's really what's happening. So there's an enzyme called telomerase, and that's really kind of in control of it. So when we talk about telomeres, when we talk about longevity, we're really talking about this enzyme called telomerase. And the telomerase, if we can keep that working, the telomerase is actually what's building those nucleotides, those telomeres back onto there.
Okay. All right. Well, you're about to lead into certain foods that are linked to a healthier cellular aging process. So I believe you're going to start talking about that. So yeah,
well,
food.
And food and diet is really, really important. And what you want to do is you want to stick to your whole foods. You don't want to be eating a lot of processed food. Processed food seems to damage the telomeres faster. So you want to have whole grains. You want to have whole fruits, whole vegetables, things like that. You want to be eating good, healthy protein. And you know, Trevor, what's interesting for you and me is that your diet doesn't affect our telomeres as much as it affects Katie's. Women are more affected by diet when it comes to telomerase than men are. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, that is interesting.
Is that a new phenomenon that they've discovered?
What's that?
Is that a new thing that they've discovered, that women are more affected, or do they know that all the time?
I read that in an article that's 4 or 5 years old, so they've known it for a while.
Well, I was just going to say, for those who are watching, Kurt, I think Katie's looking a hell of a lot better than you and I. So,
but that's what I was going to talk about next. Is that so? They also found that lifestyle is more important than diet.
Oh.
And Katie works out, and you don't.
And what do you do? All right, so I guess you're talking about, like, your diet's so important, but what about the stresses? Obviously processed foods are no good for us, but things such as smoking, lack of sleep, and what sort of effects and other kinds of things, toxins perhaps in that people are using on their bodies every day. I guess I'd be very, what sort of effects would
stress is really, really important. I think stress is probably, something that's really not looked at enough when we're talking about aging, how important it really is. And people, I think when they think of stress, they think of emotional stress. Oh, my job, I don't have enough money, things like that. They think of emotional stress factors and that, but really there's a lot more stress factors that should come into play. I mean, we should be talking about chemical stress, right? The food we eat, things like that. It falls into the same category. Injuries, like my motorcycle accident that I had a decade ago. That accident is making my telomeres so that I have a shorter lifespan because of a previous injury. So that's one of the reasons that I'm really working at trying to slow this thing down. It's interesting when they take and they interviewed over 100 people that were over the age of 100. And they asked those people, they said, okay, what's the most, and they looked at diet, they looked at smoking, they looked at obesity, they looked at being overweight, they looked at all these different factors. And you know what the number one factor they found is they found that the most important thing was attitude.
Oh, wow.
Mindset. Most important thing.
Wow. Awesome. All right, so you mentioned about exercise and how Katie's looking so much better than you and I because of the fact that she exercises. So what have you got to say about that?
Yeah, well, exercise actually, when you take a look at it, I remember when I first started talking about telomeres and I started talking about telomerase, my son was in his first year of medical school at the time. And he said, well, Dad, he said, I can go to the gym and I can increase my telomere length faster at the gym than you can by changing your diet. Wow. And so it really does make a big difference. And so what the scientists are saying is that if we can all get a moderate aerobic exercise in 45 minutes long, 3 times a week, 45 minutes long, 3 times a week, that's they found that that's almost the perfect amount of exercise to help with longevity.
What about,
so even though Katie works out all the time, I'm getting my 45 minutes in 3 times a week.
But Dr. Carrot, what about weight resistance exercise and muscle? Because if you do cardiovascular 45 minutes, you're not really breaking down that muscle fiber as the same as you're doing resistance or weight.
See, but that's a whole different thing. I mean, are you talking about bodybuilding or are you talking about longevity? And when it comes to longevity,
yeah.
When it comes to longevity, the scientists are saying, and I looked this up so that I could have this down. I'm reading it off my cheat sheet here. 3 times a week, 45 minutes, aerobic exercise.
Okay, excellent.
And they say if you do a variety of different kinds of exercise, it even makes it work better. So if you can do 5 minutes of this, 10 minutes of that, 15 minutes of this, and switch it around, it's actually going to work better than if you just jump on a bicycle for 45 minutes.
Well, I'm going to go do some cardio today now that you've said that.
Yeah, I think I might go and join the gym now. Good reason why. Thanks, Kurt.
You bet. Guess, yeah, and they're saying, check this out. They said that 3 times a week at 45 minutes, that's as good as doing marathons.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So telomerase, where's that come from, Kurt? That's the there's stuff out there that can help to rebuild telomeres. So telomerase, how does that work? Where's that coming from? How are they getting that from? Where's that? So
telomerase is an enzyme that your body makes, and so this telomerase, this enzyme, it's naturally occurring, and just like your telomeres are getting shortened, your telomerase is getting depleted. You're using it up. So as you age, you're using up your telomerase. And so when the scientists started working with astragalus, and they started working with Bacapa, and they started working with resveratrol, they found that these things, what they do, and even curcumin, they found that those things help by making the telomerase, so the telomerase is more effective.
All right, great.
You bet.
Good stuff. Well, that sort of winds up our little talk on telomeres. You got anything to add there, Katie?
Not really. I guess you touched on the type of ingredients you can take to extend your telomeres. So that's really important. But more importantly, after all our discussion, is that there's other things that you can do that you need to be doing before you consider that, I guess.
So here's a study before we jump off the call. I wrote down this study because I thought this would be something that people that like numbers, if you like numbers, this was pretty good. So they took 100,000 people. So they took a good segment of people. They didn't just take 5 or 10 or 15 and say, oh, this works. They took 100,000 people and they took and they looked at, kind of the different lifestyles. They looked at smoking, drinking, amount of education, different things like that. And then what they said was, okay, so let's look at the shorter telomeres. How much does it affect life? So they found that 10% of that 100,000 people, so 10,000 people had shorter than average telomeres. And they found that they had a 23% increased risk of dying earlier when they compared it to the people that had the average or longer telomeres. So if you're in that group that has shorter telomeres, it increases your risk of dying early by almost 25%.
Wow.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, that sort of leads me into another thought, is that, they've actually mapped the human genome, haven't they? So they say that we should really be living to an age of 150. So I guess the telomeres really work in with that. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, and according to Aubrey de Grey, he actually says that the first person that's going to live to be 250 years old is already alive. Already alive today, already been born. But here's the thing, when I go to all these anti-aging symposiums and research seminars, what they're saying is that we know we've already increased the likelihood that people are going to live longer. I mean, your chances of living to 100 are probably better than your mom's or your dad's or your grandpa's or your grandma's and things like that. But the key is, how do you want to get there? Do you want to get there healthy, or do you want to get there in a wheelchair?
Yeah.
Right? And that's really where the focus is now. So we're seeing a lot of things like the studies on, like we talked about last week, the nicotinamide riboside, the stuff that I talked about on the doctor's call the other day, where I talked about the curcumin. That's the stuff that we need to concentrate on, because wouldn't you rather die at the age of 90 healthy than spend the last 20 years of your life in a wheelchair?
And that's so true, Kurt. It's like people, when we start talking about age reversal or living longer, it's like what you said the other day. The first thing people think, well, I don't want to live longer if I'm sick or I don't feel well. But the thing is that living longer, if you do live longer, it means that you're living healthier. And it's really about health and wellness and feeling good while you are alive.
That's right. That's right.
Well, great. Next week, I was thinking about stepping into like resveratrol and the importance of that. So how do you feel about that one as a subject for next week?
Great.
Sounds good. I'll bring the bottle of red wine.
All right. Well, thanks, guys.
So just before we close off the webinar, if you're watching this on the replay, we really appreciate if you can just comment where you're watching from, what part of the world. That'd be really great. And thank you for watching.
I'll put a smiley face on there.
Yeah, and smiley icon.
Yeah, give us a
Tell
wow.
us where you're from.
Wow would be good.
Oh, wow. All right. Thanks, everyone.